Ladies and gentlemen, it is Thursday night, November 14th, 2024. What that means is it is the first game for week 11. Eagles are set at home versus the Commanders. Let's talk about it.
Fasten your seatbelts for the realest Eagles and Sixers YouTuber! One who plays no clickbait and gets to the point! The myth, the legend, Nicky Steves! Come to my channel, you know the deal, yo boy, always keeps things real. I'm simply statue, think they slate, dropping unrealistic mad, 2K takes for the clip. Even though cats like that get views closer to the millie, never hear me preach, LeBron to Philly. Avoid you watching the Eagles all the way through the early 22. Authentic talk, forget what others do. Come to my channel, you know the deal, yo boy, always keeps things real. The 24/7, 365 way, sports content for the reals that fill the day.
Good afternoon, folks. It is that day. It is Thursday afternoon, Thursday night football. Philadelphia Eagles will host their division rival, the Washington Commanders, in the battle for first place in the NFC East. Eagles coming to this matchup 7-2 on a 5-game winning streak. Commanders coming to the 7-3, fresh off a loss against the Pittsburgh Steelers in a nail biter. As always, we're doing this thing. We're kicking and rocking with it live on my channel and the Hardcore Sports Network. And the link to both channels are in the chat as always. So let's kick it and let's get right into it. Heading into this matchup, we're minus 3.5 point favorites via ESPN. They have the odds set in our favor, which I understand, which makes sense because we have been, we have more experience in these big game situations, and we are on a 5-game winning streak. With that being said, though, that 5-game winning streak is and the Steelers beating the Commanders just a few short days ago is no reflection of how this game will play out tonight. Because one of the several factors we have to take into consideration. Number one, we are on a 5-game winning streak, but let's look back on that 5-game winning streak. It's been against the Cleveland Browns, New York Giants, Cincinnati Bengals, Jacksonville Jaguars, and Dallas Cowboys, all teams that are under 500 on the season. Now, the Commanders, yes, they've had a relatively softer schedule. They've had some similar opponents that we have. They swept the Giants, played them twice already. The Bengals, the Browns. So there were some similar opponents, but then they have also lost to the Ravens and Steelers, but put up valiant efforts in those performances. We haven't been tested yet against teams the likes of the Steelers and Ravens. We don't play them till later on. So that's a fun thing we got to consider too. And furthermore, another factor is the travel. Commanders are only coming, they don't have too far of a commute because they were home against the Steelers. Now they come to Philly. It's a commute, but compared to the Eagles who had to play on the road against the Cowboys Sunday, then come all the way back to Philly with little time to prepare, that could play a factor as well, despite the odds being in our favor. But ultimately, we'll have to see how it plays out. The odds may or may not be a contributing factor to how this game works out. First, we're going to start off, we're going to take a look at the depth charts for both teams and see where they stand. Because for the most part, we are healthy going into this matchup. And the Commanders, they do have a few key pieces missing. We'll get into it real quick. Look at the Eagles depth chart headed into this one. You got, of course, for the most part, we're healthy. And Jordan Mailata, there's the big key at left tackle. Jordan Mailata is back. He's been out. He's been on IR. Fred Johnson had to fill in for his shoes, but Mailata's back. But the question is, how will he fare in this first game back? I mean, he hasn't practiced much, and he had very little time to get back into football shape for this matchup. Imoni Bentley, yes, sir. Go Birds, go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly all the way. That's one question. How will Jordan Mailata factor in with little time to prepare and get himself back into game shape? And you still got the rest of the teams mostly healthy. They've at least been on the field. On the defensive side of the ball, most of our guys are healthy. For the Eagles, it looks Eagles were mostly healthy, but we'll have to see how it fares out. And for the Commanders, there are some question marks on their routes, for their depth chart, but we'll show you that real quickly. Let's take a look. For the Commanders, you see most notable at left tackle, Brandon Coleman or Cornelius Lucas are both questionable for tonight, but somebody's got to play. That means somebody could be less than 100%, which could be a favorable matchup for returning Jordan Mailata, but we'll have to see how that plays out. The rest of it, you got Brian Johnson Jr., Austin Eckler look like they're going to play. Terry McLaurin, Noah Brown, Luke McCaffrey, Zach Ertz playing against his former team. There's a bit of revenge there. I'm surprised that hasn't been pointed out as a key matchup, but we'll get more into that in a minute. On the defense side of the ball, we know Jonathan Allen, their right tackle's out. Norrell Pollard's out at left tackle. Marshawn Lattimore is expected to be out. Michael Davis will be filling in. And for our struggling Commanders secondary, who hasn't played that great this season. We saw against the Steelers and against the Ravens, not exactly the best. And we already got an early score prediction. E-Money's got 45-17. Eagles for his score prediction. Okay, that's bold. But I respect the confidence. I do respect the confidence. And that's interim with Lattimore being out. This looks like this should be a favorable matchup for the Eagles secondary. And while we're talking key matchups, which is what we're going to be doing, let's start with that. Eagles pass game versus the Commanders secondary. Now, on paper, this looks really easy because you got A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, even Jahan Dotson, who hasn't got many targets but has made a nice catch the past 2 weeks. Greg John, hello, good afternoon. Thanks for stopping by as always. And you got those guys. So even though John Dotson hasn't got many targets, he is playing against his former team. So this could be a great matchup for him to step into the lineup and get some reps against his former team. That's going to be in it. So you got the possibility of being utilized more. And then, of course, Dallas Goedert in this matchup. So in favor, we should be able to easily take care of business against the Commanders secondary. The Commanders secondary, you look at their secondary beside Marshawn Lattimore, who they traded for, who's ruled out for tonight, as just showed you a few moments ago. It's not very optimistic for their secondary going against A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and even maybe Jahan Dotson a little bit more than we're used to seeing for this particular occasion. But so it looks like if we get the ball off, it should be a favorable matchup for us. As long as Jalen Hurts doesn't get hit and he's not under pressure a lot, we get the ball off to our guys. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, even Dallas Goedert could have a little bit of spark in the offense. We could have ourselves a solid game here passing against the Commanders. So Nikki, do you think we are contenders? I feel as though this game, the outcome of this game will give an idea of whether or not we're contenders, because to date, this is our toughest test of the season. So I feel like the way we play in this game will be the deciding factor on whether or not we're contenders. As of right now, it's hard to say because we've mostly been winning easy games. This game right here against the Commanders could be a telling factor. Really, these upcoming weeks will be. You got teams like the Commanders, Ravens, Steelers, Rams, those are games that are going to tell, particularly the Steelers, Ravens, and Commanders games will tell if we're contenders or not, based on performance and win-loss record versus those teams. So I feel like tonight will be the first step into answering that question. Yeah, back to the passing matchup. That looks like a favorable matchup, but here's the thing, too, you got to factor in. This ties in the Eagles' receiving core and the passing game versus the Commanders' secondary ties into the Eagles' offensive line versus the Commanders' defensive line, who, despite having a struggling defense secondary, they have a good solid defensive line. They have a solid front. And they have managed to get to the quarterback consistently throughout the season. That's their one main strength here. What is it? The Commanders, while they struggle against the run, they've been able to get heat in the passing game. You do have Dante Fowler is the biggest threat, 8.5 sacks on 31 pressures. The Commanders, most specifically Dante Fowler, can bring the heat. They know how to get to the quarterback. So that's the biggest factor as well. Can the Eagles get the ball off? Can they avoid costly turnovers? Because Jalen Hurts, we know, has fumbled the ball on hits throughout the season. It happened against the Cowboys when Micah Parsons got to him. But can the Eagles avoid that same fate here in this one? Because if the Commanders get to him, that could create a struggle in the passing game. So we got to be able to also match our offensive line has to match up well against their defensive line. And with Jordan Mailata being back, you're hoping that this is the spark that the Eagles' offensive line gets a spark on, because they've struggled at times throughout the season. So let's not just get too careful. So that's another factor we got to do. We got to be able to avoid getting hit. We can run the ball, of course, with Saquon. The Commanders have not been the most efficient against the run game. I mean, throughout the season, the Commanders, they ranked 27th in pass defense. But they also been giving up average 4.9 yards against the run. And Jaylen Warren for the Steelers had himself a field day. Now you get Saquon Barkley, who has the second most rushing yards in the league entering week 11, going against the struggling Commanders' run defense. That's one way to avoid the pass rush. Run the ball and wear down their defense a little bit, create holes in the passing game. That's one way to get to them. Another way to do it is to you move Hurts out of the pocket where he's less likely to get hit by the defensive line. Do rollout plays, some screen passes on rollout plays, some screen passes. Those things, they could help a little bit as well. Maybe using Saquon in the passing game a little bit. Using A.J. Brown, some screen passes could help out a little bit, as well as running the ball, allowing Jalen Hurts to make some plays with his feet. Those are ways to help out, because the Commanders have 27 sacks on the season. They're tied with the Browns. So far, they're doing pretty good. They're tied for 9th in sacks allowed. So it's also important. So it's important that we can't leave Jalen Hurts in the pocket too long. He has the ability to make plays with his feet. Use it. We have a run game. Use it. And that could help us out in the passing game, where A.J. Smitty and company can create mismatches against the struggling Commanders secondary. So those two matchups right there, the run game versus Washington's struggling run game, and the Eagles wide receiver game versus the Commanders struggling secondary, are two key matchups. But on the flip side, you got to worry about Washington's ability to get heat to the quarterback. Eagles haven't been the strongest against stopping the pressure. That's the risky matchup. That could give Washington's defense the biggest threat in this game against us. So it's important that we don't let them get to Jalen. Now, on the flip side, you got the Commanders' passing game. And the Commanders, on the flip side, they have themselves, a dual threat quarterback in Jaden Daniels, who can throw and can run. We've seen, he's connected with Terry McLaurin the most. You also have Zach Ertz as a target who's familiar with this Eagles team, who knows the ins and outs of this team. So that's a bit of a tough match. It's going to be a tough matchup there because Zach Ertz, who knows this team, he could get a few. He could be a top target in the passing game. And you got Daniels, who can make plays with his feet as well, similar to Hurts. So far, the Eagles, throughout their games so far, they haven't really gone against a mobile quarterback that can move like Jaden Daniels can. So they'll be curious, can this team stop a mobile quarterback? And Daniels is known for getting rid of the ball quickly, despite the fact that the Eagles have picked up in the past 5 games and gotten more sacks on the quarterback. They've done so against teams under 500. This is their toughest game to the season. Can this Eagles defensive line bring the heat on Jaden Daniels? Even though it's, on the paper, it looks like, oh yeah, our defense has been balling. We can do it again, but this is our toughest matchup so far. I'm not automatically sold on the hype. This Commanders team, got to remember, can do something. So I feel like one of the biggest keys is we got to score on offense. And we got to score often. Daniels only has 2 INTs, and he hasn't fumbled since week 1. He had 3 fumbles in week 1, but that was his first game of the season. His first game of his NFL career. In the time since, they've only gotten stronger. And Jaden Daniels has improved since those 3 fumbles in week 1. And those are those are the key matchups right here. Now, give me one moment. I'll be right back in a minute. Then when I get back, we'll talk about keys to victory. Folks, I'm back now after a few minutes of stepping away. And we're going to talk in just a few moments go over keys to victory, give score predictions, and wrap this bad boy up. All right, so I wanted to close that door real quickly. Now, let's get into it. We're back. We're going to go over our keys to victory. Just went over the key matchups, went over the strengths and weaknesses of both teams. Went over the Eagles' run game's a strength against Commanders' struggling run defense. Eagles' passing game versus their secondary is a strength, but the Commanders do have a good defensive line that can bring the heat Eagles haven't been the most efficient in stopping the pressure. We've talked about that. Now let's get and use it to break down the keys to victory. Keys to victory. Number one, we should lean toward the run. Now, last week, during the 5-game winning streak, 4 of the 5 games, we've leaned more toward calling run plays. We did get away from that a little bit last week against the Cowboys, but to be fair, Saquon wasn't at 100% throughout the game, so we kind of had to adjust. And to be fair, we were playing a struggling Cowboys team, so we didn't really have to rely on the run. But this matchup, we're playing against the Commanders team that, wow, they're not great. Their secondary has struggled. Their defensive line can bring heat. It's important we get back to running the ball and making Saquon and even Jalen Hurts running the focal point of our offense in this matchup. It's time we get back to that. Because the Commanders, for their ability to get pressure, they're not really that great against the run. And so far, they played off mostly an easy schedule against teams that don't really have much of a run game. Now they're going against Saquon Barkley. They already had a game against Derrick Henry. Now they're going against Saquon. There's a matchup for the Eagles to take advantage of. Let's run the ball. Let's get the ball back in Saquon's hands. If you feel he's not fully 100%, okay, we can use plays with Jalen where he rolls out the pocket, makes quick passes on his feet, or runs himself. Or we could use Kenneth Gainwell in short yardage situations, like 2nd and 2s, not throughout the entire game, but you could throw Kenneth Gainwell in maybe a few times in short yardage situations. Give it a try, see how it works. If you're a little bit concerned about Saquon not being 100% headed into this matchup, that's one way you could do it. But we got to find a way to utilize the run game, slow down the pass rush's potential. And then if we hit on that key, then that ties the key to let the run game create holes in the passing game. That would be key 2. Then we could throw the ball, utilize the air game a little bit more, create mismatches with their secondary. It's the second key. Another key to victory in this one is to get off to a hot start, because we haven't done so much this season. And knowing the Commanders' offense, this is the toughest offense we faced in the past 6 matchups since our bye week. It's important that we get off to a hot start. We managed to get some points on the board in order to keep up with them, because I don't see the Commanders scoring under 20 in this matchup. I just don't see it. I feel they'll at least get to 20 or more in this matchup. So I feel it's important that we get off to a hot start, manage to score some points, at least get a field goal, a touchdown, or both, something in the first quarter to at least establish a tone that, hey, we can score points and move the ball downfield. First drive, I think particularly, we got to at least get points out of it. Even if it's only a field goal, get points on that first drive. Let's get off to a hot start. Another key victory is we can't turn the ball over, especially in a game that's expected to be a tight matchup against a division rival, where we're coming off very little rest time. The Commanders are doing the same thing, but we had a longer travel back home than the Commanders have had from home to the link. It's important that, as well as getting off to a hot start, we avoid turnovers, because if we commit 2 or 3 turnovers, that could be the deciding factor in the outcome of this game. Another key to victory right there. On the defensive side of the ball, we got to find some ways to at least get to the Commanders. We have our edge guys, and we got a banged up offensive line. We know left tackle's banged up. Josh Sweat could have a favorable matchup there. Let Josh Sweat pounce. He has a favorable matchup against the banged up secondary. At least utilize it to try to get some pressure on Jaden Daniels. Maybe try to at least make an effort to slow him down, even if it doesn't mean that we necessarily stop. Even if we don't actually stop the run, stop him from moving, we don't stop him from getting rid of the ball quickly. If he feels some pressure, it could force him to throw the ball a little quicker. Maybe we get to him a few times. It could at least do something there if we get some pressure against these guys. Now, our secondary has been pretty solid, but we'll have to see how they go against Terry McLaurin. That's the main thing right there. Quinyon Mitchell against Terry McLaurin. But I mean, so my main keys to victory, to recap, are run the ball, get off to a hot start, avoid turnovers, bring some pressure on Jaden Daniels, at least try to get there to him. We know he's quick. We know he can move on his feet, but we got to at least try to get something there. Those are my main keys to victory. If you guys want to add a key to victory in the comments yourself or the live chat, feel free to do so. That being said, I said everything I was going to say. All we got to do now is wait to see what happens. I'll come back Saturday. We'll do the recap. Gets to get it out the way. So to everyone tuned in, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this. Drop a like if you haven't done so already. Let's just hope for an Eagles win. For score predictions, I'm going to have to be a homer in this one, but I'll say we win this matchup by a score of 30-26. I feel like this time could be a much more competitive matchup. We're going against a healthy Commanders team who finally has an offense going, who finally has a sense of direction. So I feel like this is going to be a tough matchup, but it's winnable. But we'll see what happens. Come back, talk about it later over the weekend. So again, everyone tuned in, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great rest of your day, Thursday night or Friday, depending on which time you're catching this. Boy, Nicky Stees signing off. Till next time, fly, Eagles, fly, and peace.